Hay without me. The smell of charcoal and burning meat hung thick in the backyard. Zoya stood at the edge of the patio, paper plate trembling slightly in her hands, watching her family laugh at something her brother-in-law had said. She hadn't heard the joke. She'd been thinking about the mountains, the way they looked from the cabin window in Colorado, how the morning light had turned the peaks gold. "Zoya's got that look again," her sister Maureen said, loud enough to cut through the conversations. "Like she's somewhere else." Everyone turned. Zoya felt the weight of their attention, the way you feel a sudden drop in temperature. "Just thinking about my vacation," she said quietly. "It was nice to get away." The words came out softer than she'd intended, almost apologetic. She hadn't meant to draw focus. She never did. Her father set down his beer with a deliberate thunk. He was a big man, made bigger by the way he occupied space, sprawling in his chair, legs wide, one arm draped over the back, as if he owned not just the seat, but the air around it. "Vacation," he repeated, tasting the word. Then he smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, we're planning one too, to the lake house, 2 weeks this summer." Zoya nodded. "That sounds lovely." "For the family," he added, pausing just long enough. "Without you, of course." The laughter started with her mother, a sharp bark that seemed to surprise even her. Then Maureen joined in and her brother-in-law, and within seconds the whole table was laughing, some of them so hard they had to wipe their eyes. Zoya stood perfectly still, the paper plate bent under her grip, grease from the burger seeping through, warm and slick against her palm. She could feel her face doing something, not crying, not quite blank, but something in between that made her skin feel too tight. Her father raised his beer toward her, a mock toast. "Nothing personal, sweetheart, just family only, you understand." She set the plate down on the nearest surface, carefully, as if it were made of glass. No one noticed when she walked to her car. No one called after her. The drive home took 12 minutes. She counted every one. The thing about being useful is that people stop seeing you as a person. You become a function, a solution to problems you didn't create. Zoya had been solving her family's problems for 8 years. It started small. $100 here when her mother's car needed a repair she couldn't possibly afford. $200 there when Maureen's husband lost his job and they were just barely scraping by. Then her father's business hit a rough patch, though it always seemed to be hitting rough patches. And suddenly Zoya was covering the mortgage. Just for a month, just until things turned around. Things never turned around. The joint account had been her father's idea. For family emergencies, he'd said, so we can all contribute. Zoya contributed. No one else did. But they all withdrew. She didn't mind at first. That's what family does, she told herself. They help each other. But somewhere along the way, helping became expected. Expected became demanded. And demanded became a condition of belonging. She worked as an elementary school teacher at Riverside Elementary, where she taught 2nd grade. The kids called her Miss Zoya and drew her pictures of flowers and dogs with too many legs. They hugged her knees and told her secrets during recess. She loved them with a fierceness that surprised her sometimes, these small humans who still believed the world was mostly good. She worked extra hours, tutoring after school, picked up summer programs, took on curriculum development projects. The money went to the account, the family account, the family emergency fund that funded everything except actual emergencies. Maureen bought a new car, her father upgraded his golf clubs, her mother redecorated the living room, twice. When Zoya mentioned she'd been saving for a trip, her mother had looked at her like she'd suggested burning down an orphanage. "Saving?" she'd said, "while your father is struggling?" Zoya had looked at the new curtains, the new coffee table, the new lamp that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. "Right," she'd said. "Sorry." But she'd gone anyway. She'd taken Emily, her partner of 3 years, the woman her family pretended didn't exist, and they'd driven to Colorado. They'd hiked trails and watched sunsets and spent an entire afternoon lying in a meadow, saying nothing, needing nothing but the quiet and each other. When she returned, her mother's first words were, "Must be nice to be so selfish." Zoya had started to explain about how she'd been planning this for months, how she'd used her own money from the tutoring sessions, money she'd kept separate specifically for this, but her mother had already turned away. "Your sister called. She needs help with the kids next weekend. I told her you'd do it." Zoya had done it, because that's what you did. You showed up, you helped, you proved over and over that you deserved to exist in their orbit. And in return, they laughed when your father said you weren't family. The text came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Account declined. What's going on? Zoya stared at her phone. She was sitting on her couch, Emily head in her lap, an old movie playing on TV that neither of them was really watching. Emily had been drawing lazy circles on Zoya's knee, but her hand had gone still. "Your mom?" Emily asked. Another text appeared. "Need to withdraw 5K. There's an emergency." There was always an emergency. Zoya's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could see it playing out. The back and forth, the explanation that wouldn't be accepted, the guilt trip that would follow. She could hear her mother's voice. "After everything we've done for you?" What had they done for her? The question arrived fully formed, and it startled her. Because she'd never asked it before. Not really. She'd accepted the premise that she owed them always for the crime of existing, for being born, for taking up space in their lives. But what had they actually done? Her father had mocked her sexuality for years, before finally pretending it didn't exist. Her mother had compared her to Maureen so often that Zoya sometimes forgot she was supposed to be her own person. Maureen herself had borrowed money, clothes, time, emotional labor, and paid back nothing but contempt. They had given her a childhood, yes, a roof, food, the basics. But that's not generosity. That's the legal minimum. Everything else, every bit of connection, every moment of feeling like she belonged, she'd had to purchase, over and over, with money and sacrifice and the erasure of her own needs. "Pay without me," she typed, then deleted it. She opened the banking app instead. The joint account glowed on her screen. $12,847.23. Her contributions over the last year alone totaled close to $40,000. She transferred everything to her personal account. All of it. Then she blocked the cards, changed the account passwords, and renamed it in the system. The new name appeared on her screen. "Pay without me." Emily sat up, looking at her. "Zoya?" "I'm done," Zoya said. Her voice sounded strange, calm. "I'm completely done." Her phone started ringing before she'd even set it down. The calls lasted 3 days. Her mother, crying about betrayal, her father, cold and threatening, Maureen, screaming about how Zoya had always been selfish, had always thought she was better than them. Zoya listened to the voicemails once, then deleted them. She didn't respond. She didn't explain. She didn't defend herself. Emily had been the one to suggest it. You don't owe them a dissertation on why you're allowed to have boundaries. You don't owe them anything. The silence was harder than Zoya expected. Not because she missed them. She was startled to realize she didn't. Not really. But because she'd spent so long filling every space with appeasement, with explanation, with the exhausting work of making people understand her basic humanity. Without that noise, the world felt enormous and strange. On the 4th day, they showed up at her apartment. Zoya was grading papers at her kitchen table when she heard the key in the lock. She looked up, confused. Emily was at work, and she was the only other person who had a key. The door swung open. Her father walked in first, her mother close behind, Maureen bringing the rear. They moved through her apartment like they owned it, her father heading straight for the living room, her mother to the kitchen. "You changed the locks on us?" her mother said, setting her purse on the counter. Then she paused, frowning. "Oh, wait, we still have the old key." Zoya stood slowly. Her heart was hammering, but her voice came out steady. "Get out." Her father turned from where he'd been examining her bookshelf. "We need to talk about this account situation." "Get out of my apartment." "Don't be dramatic," Maureen said, dropping onto the couch. "We're family." The word landed like a stone. Zoya looked at her sister. At the woman who'd borrowed her car and returned it on empty, who'd asked her to babysit and left her alone with 3 kids for 9 hours, who told people at family gatherings that Zoya was going through a phase when Emily came up in conversation. "You're not family," Zoya said quietly. "You made that very clear at the barbecue." Her father waved a dismissive hand. "That was a joke. It wasn't funny. You're too sensitive. You told me I wasn't part of the family vacation. Everyone laughed. You toasted to it." Her mother sighed, the long-suffering sound she made when she thought Zoya was being difficult. "We didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" No one answered. "Get out," Zoya said again. "All of you. Now. Not until we settle this account business," her father said. His voice had gone hard. "You can't just steal from the family." "I didn't steal anything. That was my money. It was in a joint account that I funded, alone, for years." "We're family," her mother repeated, as if it were a magic spell. "Family helps each other." Zoya felt something crystallize inside her. It was clarity, sharp and cold and absolutely certain. "Help?" she said. "I've helped for 8 years. I've paid for your cars, your house, your vacations. I've babysat. I've reorganized schedules. I've shown up for every event, every crisis, every last-minute emergency. And the one time I took a vacation with my own money, you called me selfish. You made me feel guilty for existing. And then, at a family gathering, my father announced I wasn't actually family." She took a breath. They were all staring at her now, their faces showing various shades of discomfort and anger. "So no, we're not family. Family doesn't work like this. And you need to leave my apartment right now, or I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare," Maureen said. Zoya picked up her phone and dialed. They left, her mother first, muttering about how Zoya had changed, how Emily had poisoned her mind. Maureen followed, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Her father paused in the doorway. "You'll regret this," he said. "I already do. I regret not doing it sooner." After they left, she sank onto the couch and shook for 20 minutes. When Emily came home and found her there, she didn't ask questions. She just held her. The locksmith came the next day. The complaint arrived 2 weeks later. Principal Henderson called her into his office, his expression grave. Someone had filed a concern with the school board, claiming Zoya had been inappropriate with students. The details were vague, but serious enough to require investigation. "I don't believe it," Henderson said quickly. "But I have to follow protocol. You'll be on paid leave while we sort this out." Zoya felt the floor tilt. "Who filed it?" He hesitated. "I can't say, but it came through official channels." She knew anyway. The email address on the complaint form, visible for just a second when Henderson shifted the papers, had Maureen's name in it. Emily was the one who suggested the lawyer. Her Aunt Denise, who'd been through her own family nightmare years ago, recommended someone who specialized in harassment cases. "Document everything," the lawyer said at their first meeting. "Every call, every text, every interaction. If they show up at your home again, call the police immediately, and we'll file a restraining order if necessary." The investigation took 3 weeks. In that time, Zoya kept meticulous records. The voicemails, the texts, the statements from neighbors who'd seen her family force their way into her apartment. Emily wrote an affidavit. So did 2 of Zoya's colleagues who'd overheard Maureen on the phone once, threatening to ruin her if she didn't stop being difficult. When the school cleared her, finding no evidence whatsoever of inappropriate behavior, Henderson apologized personally. "Your sister won't be able to file again. We've flagged her information. And I'm sorry this happened." Zoya didn't feel victorious. She felt tired. The restraining order was granted in mid-June. Her family contested it, of course, showing up to court with matching looks of wounded innocence. Her father even cried on the stand, talking about how his daughter had abandoned them, how money had corrupted her, how he just wanted his little girl back. Zoya's lawyer presented the voicemails. The judge granted the order for 1 year.
extendable if there were violations. They won't stop, Emily said that night. They were packing boxes, preparing to move to a new apartment across town, somewhere her family didn't know about, somewhere with better locks and a doorman and distance. I know, Zoya said. Are you okay? Zoya looked around the apartment. At the walls she'd painted herself, the bookshelf Emily had built her for Christmas, the photos of the two of them scattered throughout. Her family wasn't in any of them. She'd removed those photos months ago, she realized. Before Colorado. Before the barbecue. Some part of her had already been leaving. I'm getting there. The thing about cutting off your family is that no one tells you about the guilt. It comes in waves, unexpected and drowning. You'll be fine for days, living your life, and then you'll see a father and daughter at the grocery store, and something will crack open inside you. You'll wonder if you were too harsh, if you should have tried harder, if there was some combination of words that would have made them understand.
Zoya felt it most at school. Parents' days, when families crowded into her classroom to see their children's work, to meet the teacher, to be part of something. She'd watch them and think, were mine ever like this? Was there ever a time when they looked at me the way these parents look at their kids? She couldn't remember one. Emily was patient with the guilt. She never said, I told you so, or you're better off without them. She just listened when Zoya needed to talk, held her when she didn't, and reminded her, gently, always gently, that missing the idea of family wasn't the same as missing the reality of what they'd been. You're grieving, Aunt Denise said, when Zoya called her one evening, crying for reasons she couldn't articulate. You're grieving the family you deserved, the one you never got. That felt true. The new apartment was smaller but brighter. It had a balcony that faced east, and on her days off, Zoya would sit there with coffee and watch the sunrise. Emily planted herbs in containers, basil and rosemary and thyme, and they'd use them in dinner, laughing when they added too much of something and had to improvise. They made their own traditions. Sunday breakfasts that lasted until noon, movie nights with terrible films they could mock, long drives with no destination, just music and conversation, and the sense that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Zoya started seeing a therapist. Dr. Reeves was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a tendency to let silence stretch until Zoya filled it. In those silences, truths emerged. I thought if I just gave enough, they'd see me, not as a resource, as a person. And now I think they didn't want to see me, because if they saw me, really saw me, they'd have to acknowledge what they were doing, and that would make them uncomfortable. Dr. Reeves nodded. So they kept you in a role, the helper, the fixer, the one who gives without asking for anything in return. Except I was asking. Every time I showed up, I was asking to be loved. And they just took what I offered and gave nothing back. That's not family, Dr. Reeves said gently. That's exploitation with a biological excuse. Her mother tried one more time in September. She showed up at Riverside Elementary at pickup time when Zoya was walking her students to their parents. She stood at the edge of the parking lot, far enough away that the restraining order technically wasn't violated, close enough that Zoya could see her. Their eyes met across the distance. Her mother looked smaller somehow. Older. For a moment, just a moment, Zoya felt the old pull, the instinct to go to her, to ask what was wrong, to fix whatever problem had brought her here. But then she remembered the barbecue, the laughter, the toast. She remembered years of being told she was too sensitive, too difficult, too much and not enough at the same time. She remembered her father walking into her apartment like he owned it, Maureen trying to ruin her career, the complaint that could have destroyed everything she'd built. She turned away and kept walking.
Behind her, she heard her mother call her name. Once, Zoya didn't turn around. By the time she reached her car, her mother was gone. They had Thanksgiving at Aunt Denise's house, just the three of them, Zoya, Emily, and Denise, plus Denise's partner Carol and their two massive dogs who thought they were lapdogs despite weighing 80 pounds each. It was small, quiet. The turkey was slightly dry, and they burned the rolls, and nobody cared because they were too busy laughing at Carol's impression of their neighbor's aggressive holiday decorations. To found family, Denise said, raising her glass. The ones we choose because they choose us back. They clinked glasses. Zoya felt something in her chest loosen. A knot she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. Later, when Emily was helping with dishes and Carol was taking the dogs out, Denise found Zoya on the back porch. "You doing okay?" she asked. Zoya nodded. "Better than I expected. First holidays are hard. Were yours?" Denise was quiet for a moment. She'd cut off her own family 15 years ago, for reasons she'd never fully explained. Zoya had never asked. Denise finally said, "They were brutal. I kept thinking I'd made a mistake, that I should have tried harder, been more patient, found a way to make them understand." Did that feeling ever go away? Eventually, when I realized I was mourning people who never really existed. I was grieving the parents I deserved, not the ones I had. Once I accepted that they were never going to be what I needed, it got easier. How long did that take? Couple years, Denise smiled. But you know what helped? Building something better. Making a life that was actually mine, with people who saw me. Really saw me. She gestured back toward the house, where they could hear Emily laughing at something Carol said. "You're already doing that," Denise said. "You're already free. You just have to let yourself feel it." Christmas came quietly. Zoya woke in the new apartment to snow falling outside the window and Emily's arm draped over her waist. They made coffee and opened presents, small things, thoughtful things. A book Zoya had mentioned once, a necklace Emily had been eyeing, a joint gift to themselves, tickets to return to Colorado in the spring. In the afternoon, they video called Emily's family, her parents, her brothers, her nieces and nephews, all of them crowding around the camera to say hi, to ask how Zoya was doing, to tell terrible jokes, and show off new presents. Emily's mother pulled her aside before they hung up, just her face on the screen, close and concerned. "How are you really?" she asked. Zoya had met Emily's parents twice. They'd welcomed her with a warmth that had stunned her. No questions about her intentions, no judgment about her sexuality, just genuine interest in who she was. Emily's mother had sent her birthday cards. Her father had helped them move. "I'm okay," Zoya said, and she meant it. "Emily told me what happened. With your family." She paused. "I'm sorry, they didn't deserve you." Zoya's throat tightened. "Thank you. You're welcome here, right? Anytime, for any reason. This is your family too now, if you want it to be." Zoya couldn't speak. She just nodded. When they hung up, Emily found her crying in the kitchen. "Happy tears?" she asked carefully. "Yeah," Zoya managed. Happy tears. Spring arrived in bursts of green and gold. The herbs on the balcony flourished. Zoya's second graders performed a play about butterflies, and she cried at how earnest they were, how full of unself-conscious joy. She hadn't heard from her family in months. The restraining order would expire in June, but her lawyer was filing for an extension. Just in case, she'd said. Zoya wasn't worried. She'd realized something over the winter. They needed her more than she'd ever needed them. The money, yes, but more than that, they needed someone to blame, someone to mold, someone whose existence justified their own feelings of superiority and control. Without her, they'd have to face themselves. She didn't think they would. More likely, they'd find someone else to fill the role. Another relative, another friend, another person whose boundaries they could slowly erode until nothing was left. It made her sad sometimes thinking about it, but mostly she felt relief. In April, she got an email from her father. It had been sent to her school address, the only contact information he still had. The subject line read, "We need to talk." She deleted it without opening it. Emily, watching her do it, raised an eyebrow. "Not curious?" "No," Zoya said, and she wasn't. They went back to Colorado in May.
Same cabin, same trails, same meadow where they'd lean in the grass and watched clouds drift by. On the last day, they hiked to a ridge that overlooked the valley. The mountains stretched in every direction, ancient and indifferent and beautiful. Zoya stood at the edge, wind whipping her hair, and felt something click into place. "I'm not going to extend the restraining order," she said. Emily looked at her. "You sure?" "I think I am." "What changed?" She thought about it. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life afraid of them. And I'm not angry anymore, not really. I just don't care. They're strangers who happen to share my DNA. That's all they are."
That's very evolved of you, Emily said, smiling. Therapy helps. Dr. Reeves would be proud. They stood there for a while, watching the light change on the mountains. Then Emily said, quietly, "I'm proud of you too. You know that, right?" Zoya turned to her. Emily's eyes were soft, her expression open in the way it only got when they were alone. For what? For choosing yourself, for being brave enough to walk away, for building a life you actually want instead of one you think you're supposed to have. Emily reached for her hand. "That takes guts." Zoya laced their fingers together. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." The restraining order expired in June. Zoya didn't renew it. Her family didn't contact her. She didn't contact them. It was over. Finally, not with a dramatic confrontation or a tearful reconciliation, but with silence, with the simple act of walking away and not looking back. Some of her colleagues asked about it occasionally. "Do you miss them?" they'd say, usually around holidays when family became the dominant cultural narrative. "Sometimes," Zoya would answer, "I miss the idea of them, but not the reality." That was true. She missed having parents she could call. She missed having a sister who knew her. But those people had never existed, not really. They'd been fantasies she'd constructed to survive the loneliness of being fundamentally unseen. Now, she saw herself, and she was surrounded by people who saw her too. Emily, who knew her morning routine and her secret fears and the exact way she liked her coffee. Aunt Denise and Carol, who invited them over for random dinners and never asked for anything in return. Her coworkers who covered her classes when she was sick and celebrated her small victories. Her students who hugged her legs and drew her pictures and reminded her daily that love doesn't have to be complicated or conditional. Her life was smaller without her family in it, but it was also bigger, freer, more hers. In August, a year after the barbecue, Zoya and Emily got married. It was a small ceremony in Denise's backyard. 20 people, most of them friends. Emily's family came. Parents, brothers, nieces, nephews, all of them crying happy tears and making terrible toasts. Dr. Reeves came, Principal Henderson came, some of her teacher friends came, and a few of her former students' parents who'd become genuine friends over the years. Zoya wore a simple white dress. Emily wore navy blue. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about choosing each other every day, about building a life that honored both of them, about creating the family they wanted instead of accepting the ones they'd been given. When they kissed, everyone cheered. The dogs barked, someone dropped a champagne glass, and everyone left. It was perfect. That night, lying in bed in their apartment, now decorated with wedding gifts and cards and photos from the ceremony, Emily turned to her. "Any regrets?" Zoya knew what she was really asking. "Do you wish they'd been there?" "No. Not even a little." "Really?" "Really. They would have ruined it. They would have made it about them somehow. This way, it was just ours. Just for us and the people who actually love us." Emily kissed her forehead. Good. Zoya closed her eyes. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, desperate for approval, convinced her worth was measured in what she could give, terrified of being alone. That girl was gone. She'd mourned her, said goodbye to her, and let her go. In her place was a woman who knew her value,
who understood that family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about choice and respect and mutual care, who had learned, finally, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away.
They returned to Colorado every year after that. It became their tradition. A week in May, same cabin if they could get it, hiking and reading and existing together without the noise of the world pressing in. On their 5th anniversary trip, sitting in that meadow again, Emily asked if she ever heard from them. "No," Zoya said. "Sometimes I see updates through other people. Maureen had another baby, Dad retired, Mom redecorated again." "How do you feel about that?" "I'm hearing about strangers, which I guess I am." A bird called from somewhere in the trees. The grass moved in waves under the wind. "Do you think they ever understood?" Emily asked. "Why you left?" Zoya considered it. "No, I don't think they're capable of understanding. They'd have to see themselves clearly for that, and people like that, they can't. It's too painful. Easier to make me the villain. Does that bother you?" "It used to. Now?" She shrugged. "They can think whatever they want. It doesn't change my reality." They lay back in the grass, shoulders touching, watching clouds drift across impossible blue. "Thank you," Emily said softly. "For what?" "For being brave enough to leave. Because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be here. And this," she gestured at the mountains, the sky, the space between them that felt like home, "this is everything." Zoya turned her head to look at her wife, at the woman who'd stood beside her through all of it, who'd never once made her feel guilty for having boundaries, who'd shown her what real family actually looked like. She said, "It is." They stayed there until the sun started to set, painting the mountains gold and pink and purple. Then they hiked back to the cabin, made dinner together, and sat on the porch with wine and blankets, talking about nothing and everything. And Zoya realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd thought about the barbecue, about her father's words, about the laughter that had followed. It had happened. It had hurt. It had changed her. But it didn't define her anymore. She was free. Epilogue. Years later, long after the restraining order had expired and been forgotten, long after the wounds had scarred over and become just part of her history, Zoya would sometimes be asked for advice by other teachers going through similar situations, young women with families who took and took, who asked how she'd found the courage to walk away. She always said the same thing. You realize one day that you've been performing, playing a role in someone else's story, and you ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped? What would happen if I just lived my own life? Weren't you scared? They'd ask. Terrified, she'd admit. But I was more scared of spending the rest of my life being someone I wasn't, of waking up at 70 and realizing I'd given everything to people who never really wanted me, just what I could do for them. How do you know when it's time? And Zoya would think about that moment at the barbecue, the laughter, the toast, the paper plate bending in her hands. You'll know, she'd say. When the pain of staying becomes greater than the fear of leaving, you'll know. Some of them would understand. Some wouldn't. Not yet. But she'd plant the seed anyway, the way Aunt Denise had planted it in her. You deserve to be seen, really seen. And if the people around you can't do that, it's not your job to teach them. Your job is to find people who already know how, because that was the truth she'd learned, the one that had saved her. Family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. One boundary at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of choosing yourself at a time, till one day you wake up and realize, this is your life. Actually yours. And it's so much better than anything you could have imagined when you were still trying to earn a love that was never really on offer to begin with. Zoya taught 2nd grade until she retired. She and Emily traveled. They fostered dogs. They hosted Thanksgiving every year for anyone who needed somewhere to go. They built a life that was gentle and fierce and entirely their own. And sometimes, walking to her classroom or cooking dinner
or lying in bed at night, Zoya would remember that paper plate, the grease, the laughter, and she'd smile. Because that moment, that terrible, clarifying moment, had been the beginning of everything good that came after. It had hurt. God, it had hurt. But it had also set her free. Pay without me, she'd typed into that bank account, and she had. She'd paid her dues. She'd paid and paid and paid, and then she'd stopped and discovered that without the weight of all that payment, all that obligation, all that desperate performing, she could fly.
Whatever it says, we handle it together. I opened them in order. Rachel's wedding was beautiful. Everyone asked where you were. I showed them the photos from your social media. Mia, I don't even know what to say. Your villa, the gardens, the sunset, everything. It looked like something from a movie. Call me when you can, please. There was a photo attached to the last message. I opened it. It was a screenshot of one of Zara's Instagram posts. Me and Ben kissing under the wisteria arbor, the Tuscan hills golden behind us, the light making everything glow like a Renaissance painting. Zara had captioned it, "When you choose yourself, the universe chooses you back." The photo had 12,000 likes. Below my mother's messages were 3 from Rachel. I saw your wedding photos. Jesus, Mia. I can't even be mad anymore. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I needed more time to understand what I was feeling. This mixture of vindication and sadness, triumph and loss. Instead, I pulled Ben out of bed, and we walked through the villa's gardens in the morning light. Our guests were slowly emerging, gathering in the courtyard for the farewell breakfast Signora Martinelli had prepared. More handmade pasta, fresh bread, local cheeses and olives that tasted like sunshine. Patricia caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "Proud of you." Zara was already editing photos, laptop balanced on her knees, occasionally squealing and showing people images from the night before. Marcus was teaching Ben's dad a drinking song in Italian, both of them laughing helplessly. This was family. Not the people who shared your blood, but the people who showed up, who crossed oceans, who witnessed your becoming without asking you to shrink back down. We stayed in Tuscany for 3 more days after our guests left, wandering through Florence's museums, eating gelato for breakfast, making love in our villa room while church bells rang in the distance. On our last morning, Signora Martinelli found me in the garden. She said, settling onto the bench beside me, "The most beautiful weddings are not the ones with the most money or the most guests. They are the ones where people are brave, where they choose themselves even when it costs them. Your wedding, Bella? Very brave." "I lost my family," I said quietly. "No, you lost people who never learned to see you. Not the same thing." She patted my hand. "Family is not who raised you. Family is who recognizes you, who looks at you and says, 'Yes, there you are. I see you. You have more family now than when you arrived, no?'" She was right. I'd come to Tuscany with Ben and 50 guests. I was leaving with an entire network of people who'd witnessed my transformation, who'd seen me choose myself and loved me more for it, not less. The flight home was bittersweet. Leaving Tuscany felt like leaving a version of myself I'd only just discovered. But Ben held my hand the whole way, and when we landed in Boston, our apartment somehow looked different. Smaller, yes, but also full of possibility. We'd spent our house fund. We'd spent our safety net. We were starting from zero again, but we weren't the same people who'd left. Part X, the aftermath. The messages from my family continued sporadically over the next few weeks. My mother trying to bridge the gap without actually apologizing. My father gruff and uncomfortable with emotion. Rachel swinging between resentment and what might have been respect. I responded to none of them. Not because I was angry, but because I was busy. Busy with my life, my marriage, my friendships. The career I'd been neglecting in favor of being convenient. The hobbies I'd abandoned because they seemed selfish. The dreams I'd deferred because they felt too big.
Zara's photos from the wedding went viral. Not Hollywood viral, but enough that a wedding magazine reached out, wanting to feature our story. I said no. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the private knowledge that I'd bet on myself and won. 3 months after the wedding, on a Saturday morning while Ben and I were having coffee in our apartment, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking smaller than I remembered. "I didn't know if you'd answer if I called," she said. So I drove up. We stood there for a long moment, the threshold between us feeling impossibly wide. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She sat on my couch, the one I'd bought with my own money, in the apartment I'd rented with my own effort, and looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. "She brought you something," she said, pulling an envelope from her purse. "It's not much. It's not $75,000, but it's what I should have given you from the beginning." Inside was a check for $5,000, the original amount they'd planned to contribute, and a card. I opened it. My mother's handwriting, usually so perfect, was shaky. "Mia, I saw the photos from your wedding. I saw the way you looked at Ben. I saw the beauty and the joy and the life you created. I saw 50 people who loved you enough to cross an ocean. I saw what you built when you stopped waiting for us to give you permission. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I didn't see you. I didn't value you. I told myself I was being practical, but I was being cruel. You deserved $75,000. You deserved $750,000. You deserved parents who made you feel like you were worth the investment. I can't undo the years of making you second, but I can tell you this. Watching you choose yourself was the most important lesson you've ever taught me. You showed me what happens when you refuse to be diminished. I'm proud of you. I should have said that every day. I love you, Mom." I read it twice, then a third time. Ben came to stand beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he whispered. I looked at my mother, this imperfect woman who'd failed me in 1,000 ways, who'd chosen my sister over me repeatedly, who taught me I was only valuable if I was convenient, but also this woman who'd driven 4 hours to sit in my apartment, who'd written these words in her shaky hand, who was trying, finally, to see me. I thought about Villa Rosa, about the villa manager who'd called me Bella, about Ben's letter, about Marcus's toast, about every person who'd shown up for me when it mattered. I thought about the woman I'd been, the one who folded herself small, who understood, who accommodated. And I thought about the woman I was becoming, the one who took up space, who demanded reciprocity, who believed she was worth the investment. "You can't fix this with one apology," I said finally. "And you can't fix it with a check. This is going to take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. I don't know if we can get back what we lost." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But," I continued, "I'm willing to try. Not because I need you, but because I want to see if you're capable of meeting me where I am now, of seeing the woman I've become instead of the girl who used to accommodate you."